Welcome to the HC Commodities podcast, a podcast dedicated to the commodities sector and the people within it. I'm your host, Paul Chapman. This podcast is produced by HC Group, a global search firm dedicated to the commodities sector. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Really excited to host this discussion to celebrate the launch of Addy and Colin's fantastic book, The Rivers of Money. And there's two different subtitles up there. This is going to be a little bit more of a sort of a family-style podcast, so to speak. So we'll run for, I know everyone's going to be anxious to get back to the drinks and the networking and the catching up. So we'll run for sort of 25 minutes or 20 minutes of questions and a couple of questions from the audience at the end. But once again, thanks for coming. And if you haven't read the book, you should. And if you haven't bought it yet, there's a QR code over there where you can get 20% off. But it's, as I think people know, if they listen to my first episode with Colin, I'm a massive fan of it. And I think it's a book that needed to be written. And very glad that both of you have. I've got my list of pre-approved questions here.
Which you changed by...
Which I've changed. So I guess the first thing is, what's with the title?
Title. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. It's interesting because original title, believe it or not, was actually the second line was the social and economic history of modern oil trading, because Colin and I got this sort of approval from Palgrave to write that book, and we thought, this is really boring. Okay. So immediately we thought, well, we've got to write something that we want to write. We want to write a book about sort of mates and friends and put the academic side a little bit underneath the whole. So the idea of the rivers of money is that it's a metaphor. So that's just one way of hiding sort of the academic side from it. Because in get boring bits out of the way, okay, boring bits. In academia, there's a huge sort of polemic still about markets, origins of markets, where they come from, how do they started. And one theory is that it all started with capitalism, blah, blah, blah. And it's very recent, which of course is not true. And then the other one is that, is some esoteric entity out there which should never be touched. And Colin and I had long conversations over a beer or two, and we came up with the idea. Look, clearly it's from the book we wrote on Brent, it's a social construct. So I think what we need to widen it and show that it is a social construct. And how did we do it? We did it through using a narrative rather than statistics. That was common agreement. And I'll just give you an example. Instead of using statistics to say how oil trading was unimportant in early and mid-80s. Interview with Junichi Kasahara, who was head of Fibro. At the time, he started around that time as an operator in crude oil. And as an operator in crude oil, he said to me, I worked in a miscellaneous commodities department. And I thought, what a better way to present, the fact that oil trading was not important in the mid-early 80s than saying that. I mean, what graph, what statistics can do better? So that's the kind of thing we did. And the metaphor of rivers of money is also the other issue, which is a little bit academic, but I'll cut it very short here, is that it is a construct which is a social construct, and it is set by the society. And basically, the idea of the river is the market. And markets always flow following the contours of least resistance. And just like markets and traders follow the lowest cost, highest profit. So the idea is that, okay, how do we make money? We can make money, but because the social construct is constructed within society with values, ideas, and motives of the society, and has to stay within it. So anyway, the boring bit, I'm terribly sorry, is out of the way, hopefully.
I thought it was just how much money you made.
No.
I think that clears it up. It's much more academic than I thought. And I know this bit's important to you, Colin, is, there's obviously sort of the pantheon of commodity books out there, and sadly I think there's too few, right? There's sort of the Mark Rich one, there's The World for Sale, dare I mention it. What was it about this story that hadn't yet been written, and why it needed to be written now?
Well, I think apart from the fact that for me as a retired person, there was the aspect of growing personal irrelevance in the market that made me want to do something. I actually thought that this was a period that had to be memorialised before it was too late. So post round about 1990, you've got the internet, and although information on the business is very widely distributed in a kind of disaggregated form, it is there. Prior to that period, it's not there, and what we get to know through interviewing people who were there at the time. And very sadly, it's 50 years ago, and there are a lot of folks who were there at the time who are not here anymore. And so we wanted to get the personal views and recollections and reminiscences of participants and get that book written on how the business started, how it's created, how it developed into what we all know is the most important, best remunerated, most influential business that's hidden away in a small corner that nobody knows about. And we wanted, just lastly to say, we wanted to try to make it semi-academic with the accent on semi. So we tried to find as many stories as we could and inject as much sort of gentle humour into it as we could, so as not to make it entirely tiresome for people to wade their way through.
Which I think is the beauty of the book, right? Mixing the academic about how these markets started, but then the interviews and the personalities, which I'm going to stay with you, Colin, because Adi says, I wasn't around in 1985, so I can't answer this question, but you're welcome to comment. But, and again, can you just give us some sense of the difference between the day in the life of an oil trader in 1985, or when you started, and when you left the business, and could the two now trade places, or the skills? It's a completely different world.
It's kind of a different world. I mean, Oyston here will remember he was one of the big traders, and Henrik Weirborn I saw earlier at the time that will also remember that it was a very sociable business. Folks come into the office in the morning and they 9 o'clock, maybe 9:30, and they kind of had a few calls in the morning, find out what's going on. Then they went for a long lunch. And then, in the finer restaurants in Mayfair, then they would come back and have a little snooze after a few alcoholic beverages, maybe do a deal or two, hit the pub on the way back to the train, and do the same the next day. And it was very, very sociable, and
carrying their briefcase, which as you point out in the book was typically empty.
It was a glorified sandwich.
Yeah. That's not to say there wasn't a seriousness of purpose about people, but it was more relaxed. There was less regulation. It was more fun, less staid, and folks had to be sociable to be part of that milieu at that time. They didn't have to be scientific or STEM people then. Of course, now they do. Buccaneering, social skilled types may still have their place, but far more folks are, well-educated data scientists. There's a Smithsonian division of labour about the business now. So in 85, you were the salesman, you were the trader, you were the analyst, you were the quant. Now, of course, that's not the case. You have the Smithsonian division of labour, and you get all these different people who, all qualify to be counted as traders. So it's pretty different, to be honest. Some folks would make the transition with ease. Others would find it harder, I guess.
Paul, just if I may just add, I mean, today it's a lot more of a team sport. Before, you could have two guys. Okay, you go to Iran, I'll go to Guyana, or whatever. Let's get this done. Now it doesn't work that way. So it's a lot different. I think there's still the same commitment to the deal, but it's just done very, very differently. A lot of specialization in different roles, a lot of analysis, a lot of numbers, as most people here would know. So it's a team sport now.
Just kind of interestingly and briefly, Paul Horson and I had a lovely lunch when he helped me, with his research. His book, written in 1993, was the seminal book on North Sea oil trading, and still is very interesting. Anyway, we had lunch, and I noted down, I asked Paul the question, what has changed? And he said the three things I thought had changed most were the nature and cost of information, latency, and transparency. And I think, to be a bit more serious about the whole thing, that probably encapsulates pretty well what has changed.
The energy and resources sector is experiencing unprecedented change. To help navigate this change and capture its opportunities, HC Group launched Enco Insights, a global advisory network dedicated to the sector, providing senior advisors and subject matter experts to investment and infrastructure funds, law firms, and corporates. Enco Insights leverages HC Group's 20 years of connections in energy and commodities to give clients the expertise they need when the stakes are high and insight matters. Learn more at encoinsights.com.
Speaking of teams, speaking of what's also changed, is sorry, we're not talking about the mic. So wallets have grown, and somewhat like a sort of the analogy is to the Premier League, right? And I don't know if this was in the approved list of questions, but a trader hitting their peak in the 90s was commensurately very well paid, right? And I think the book brings through just these sort of clubbable types, sort of a mixture of rogues galleries, but were making a lot of money and probably weren't really unknown to the rest of the stockbroker belt. But one thing that has changed is that if you hit your peak in the 90s, you might be looking slightly jealously at the traders today, the last 5 years, these sort of eye-watering numbers that we're seeing. And this is true of commodities, it's also true of other asset classes. I just get your take on that, and kind of, given the nature that the role has changed, and perhaps you'd argue that, Colin, your career, you talk about in the book, flying to strange places in Russia and doing the deals and meeting people and that perspicacity of purpose. Are the current numbers justified? Are they worth it compared to what it took back in the day to really build an oil trading book?
Well, I think everyone who's involved or pretty much everyone who's involved in oil trading has a certain personal financial avariciousness, if you like to call it that, and so I imagine there are lots of people looking back and saying, shit, why not me? Personally, I don't think it's very useful to do that, really. Times have changed, things are different. I'd rather have been born 10 years later, but I wasn't, and it's just what it is. So whether the value added these days is enough to justify some of the big numbers or not, I think is a very open question. I have a strong view that one part of the oil market, the paper side, which relies these days very heavily on speed, is both socially and economically useless. I think the other side of the oil market, which is the merchanting.
You are here in this building, we might.
Yeah, well, and the merchanting side is socially and economically valuable. So who knows what the answer to these things are?
Socially useless, Addy?
No, I would go back and say that each period had its own heroes. And I remember when I was a young man in 20s. Now, last 5 years, it's been amazing for oil companies. It's for oil traders. It really has. But you know what? When I was a student, I remember this story. It's actually not in the book, Colin, because we didn't really talk about ourselves, did we? I was interviewed with Andy Hall in 1990. I was a student in the US looking for a job in the UK, and I remember I had no idea who he was. Okay, so I just happened to have an interview with him, and I tried to do research in the library beforehand, and then he took me to Wall Street Journal, and in 1990 his bonus was $40 million. I mean, in 1990, I don't know if many of you could actually relate to that. Some of you can. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. And so, every period had their own heroes. So
You talk about that in the book, about how actually the advent of the Wall Street refiners changed the bonus culture in the London market sort of quite significantly and quite swiftly, because there was a percentage of book, and Mark Crandall talks about that and so forth. And over here it was percentage of base salary, and that did cause that first change. And then you had the Enrons come in and the rest of it, right? But the US definitely did the London traders a favor.
Yeah, and prior to the Wall Street refiners coming in, it was 100K plus a BMW was the sort of
BMW R.
and then you worked for Bomar 1 year, that didn't work out, so you went to Avant the next year, that didn't work out, so you went somewhere else, and I think we say in the book a quote that Andy Whitrow made, which was, traders are like football managers, they fail and somebody still wants to hire them, yeah, so that was it. And then the Wall Street refiners came in and the bonus culture came with it. And they brought a seriousness of purpose a bit to the marketplace. They didn't go out for lunch often. And a lot of people, I remember, because I joined Morgan Stanley in 87, just after they started, and so late 86. And I remember more than one person saying to me, what's in your black box? And we don't have a black box, but people thought we had a black box that was special and we were doing things that they didn't understand. And all it was really was looking at the market in a way that was different, really at relative values and, rather than outright price, which was
Lotus 1, 2, 3, wasn't it?
So, yeah. And trading volatility as volatility rather than, options as price, things that weren't being done at the time. So, anyway, it was a great time for folks to be, either in the independent trading business or in the Wall Street companies, because not only were they being well remunerated, but they were royally entertained in lovely parts of the town and making lots of money. And
I guess, can you give us some sense of how you both wrote the book? And I think you both had different styles, in some ways, piles of paper. But I guess, how did you write the book? And then, from each of you, kind of what story was left on the cutting room? What was the best story left on the cutting room floor? Maybe Adi, you can.
Well, the book started with the Brent book, with the book Brent Crude Oil, blah blah blah. Because Colin wrote a chapter, I edited the book with a bunch of other old hands, and it works really, really well. Colin approached me and he said, look, I've got a bunch of notes and stuff on general oil trading. What do you think? I'd love to do a book with you. And working with Colin on the Brent book was fantastic, because always on time, always sending things before time, and always on the ball. And I thought, well, if I can write a book with anyone, it'd be with Colin, definitely. And it worked really well. I don't know. Colin may have a different view.
We didn't have a single argument over the 18 months.
Which is amazing. Which is amazing for two traders. So what was the question? I lost it now.
What was left on the code? Because you guys, what I should say is, you guys interviewed, and I'll be rich pickings for me. I'm going to mine that book for people to interview for the next decade. But you interviewed so many people, and there must be so many stories you left on the...
I'll tell you, there are two things that are probably left on the table. It was our personal stories. There's none of them are in there, pretty much. So maybe some other time. And the other ones, we really tried, it's still an academic book, so we tried to be absolutely objective, and everything had to be checked and cross-checked. So the book, the stories that we could not verify, we just kept out. There were probably the best stories, but, what do you do?
Right, Colin, give us it was the best story you can verify.
No, I don't know. Steve Jones over there will remember this one, because one morning a box arrived at Morgan Stanley like this, and I can't remember who it was to, but Charlie Rankin opened the box, and there was a full pig's head in this box. That had obviously been, the pig had been decapitated quite recently, because it was in reasonably good condition. And stuck in its mouth was a note which said, "We know where you live." And we couldn't work out why the hell this pig's head had arrived at Charlie Rankin's desk. But, such were the things that happened back then. Anyway, My favourite story in the book, and I'll tell it for those who haven't read the book, my favourite story is my ex-boss at Morgan Stanley in Glasgow was a lady called Bryce Tobin, who a feisty Irish woman who very sadly passed away just a few months ago. And Bridie used to take clients who came to Glasgow to the Britoil office for lunch at an oyster bar in the centre of Glasgow. It was an Epicurean oasis in the city of the mutton pie. Anyway, so she loved to do this. Anyway, one day we were sitting there with clients, and Bridie shucks and takes back this oyster, and her face turned. She'd obviously realised she had taken a bad oyster, so she called the maitre d' over and said, "I want a tumbler full of straight vodka." So the maitre d' came back over with this tumbler full of straight vodka, and it was something out of a university, Freshers' Week boat race. She just necked the whole straight vodka.
Antiseptic.
Shook her head. I'll kill it all. She said, "I'll kill it." We went on with the lunch. She walked back to the office with me, unaided. Had a full day's work, and it's the Irish tradition of kind of poaching slugging or something, made her hard enough. I thought that was a wonderful story that I've never forgotten. God rest her soul, lovely lady.
Hello, I'm David Hunt, founder and managing director at Hyperion Search. Founded over a decade ago, Hyperion Search has helped organisations from major utilities to startups recruit their leadership teams and key individual contributors to accelerate both their growth and the energy transition. Our three main verticals are renewable power, energy storage, and e-mobility. The energy transition and the talent that delivers it has been our passion since day one. To find out more, visit hyperionsearch.com or listen to my Leaders in Cleantech podcast, available on all platforms.
On a serious note, like lots of people, some slice of people who listen to this podcast are often grads who are studying something in business and finance and want to get into the commodities world. And, you alluded to it a bit earlier on, but it'd be good to get both your takes on kind of what advice, what are the common attributes, what are the qualities that, gave people longevity and success in this unique industry. Anyway.
Okay, let me start off. Obviously, most of the people in our industry fairly bright that come in. But you know what? Some of them work harder than the others, and the ones that work really, really hard usually get there. Okay, that's number one. The other one is just luck. Just luck. It's trading is a lot of luck. As Napoleon would say, give me a lucky general any time. And actually, most of you guys, and there are quite a few traders in here, it really helps when you work in a big book. If you join a company with a good book, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to get a lot of information. Information is the key in trading. When you work the old BPIs and Shell's trading, whatever it is now, a lot of information from refineries, from the upstream, from overseas, that really helps. But it's hard work. At the end of the day, long hours. I think we write about that. Holidays are never without phone calls. Weekends are not without phone calls. I remember so many ruined weekends with my wife away, just spending hours on the phone. It's hard work.
I mean, numeracy, critical, emotional intelligence, critical, discipline. I think my experience has been that, there are actually very, very few people who you would say are really good traders. There are a lot of people who've been lucky. There's some people who are corrupt, done very well. There are people who bully markets with the size. And but the people who really consistently make money day in, day out, not taking huge risks, are actually quite few and far between. And I remember I got a lovely quote from a lady called Trish Collins, who was in the business for a long time in different ways. And Trish said, traders run in 5-year cycles, their careers run in 5-year cycles. You get 3 average years, 1 stonking year, and then 1 complete fuck up. And
you want to get... Yes,
I can relate to that actually, because I think that's pretty accurate.
We all can, yeah.
And anyway, yeah, it's discipline and all these, humility and all these things, not thinking you're bigger than the market.
But you know what, Paul? I'm grateful for Colin to bring this up, and I've written this before in my previous couple of books. It's oil market is not democratic. It's $1, one vote. So people with big books will always win.
And I say join a company that has a good training program, but that's public service announcement. I can get a good headhunter,
HC Capital.
There you go. So final couple of questions. One is, this is a history of oil trading. What do you see, if you do at all, are the biggest risks to this very lucrative, very successful sector that's spent a long time, lowering the prices of oil, solving problems around the world? What are the one or two things you see out there that could stop it functioning and being a successful market for economies as well as the traders themselves?
Well, what's made it great? Contango, volatility. If we get calm and quiet waters in oil markets, then that's not going to be any good for anybody, really, I suppose. And I think from the lesson, I think from the past is that regulatory overreach could be very damaging if it occurred. And it occurred in 2008 and it killed the banks. It benefited a different sector, the independent trading sector. But arguably, it made things more expensive for people who were benefiting from the liquidity that the banks offered, and so, I think regulatory overreach would be dismal if it were to.
And that pendulum is swinging back, right? Long period of sort of free open markets, going back that way.
Well, what we talk about in the book about Nixon arbitrage, that's one of the actually created infamous oil trading. I mean, that was prior to Mark Rich and all the what we call proper oil trading, because it created, by fixing prices, all the new oil, it created arbitrage between same molecules. So what happened, all these people that had telephone and a fax would become a trading company, okay? So we talk about that quite a bit. But it's all coming back now, which is quite scary, Paul, because how many times have I heard people talking about fixing TTF, and now we're going to gas now, but it's dreadful. How can you fix the price of a futures market? Because you're not fixing physical markets, so anyone who's hedged is now completely out of the water. I mean, these are incredibly stupid ideas. So that's why we say towards the end of the book as well, in the epilogue, I think we do only hope that the governments that now obviously playing a increasingly more important role in the oil markets are actually going to abstain from killing the messenger, because price is a messenger. You don't kill that. You don't.
That is on the industry. I've got a question about this.
Right.
Actually, also engaging back, right, and educating and having, which is a notoriously sort of isolated, secretive industry, actually having a voice to go back.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is why actually these markets are important.
Absolutely.
And
And just to mention the second one, I won't go into it. But there is a green elephant in the room. I mean, I know we're now swinging back a little bit on climate and stuff, but the industry needs to clean up and to stay here, and it will stay for a very long time. But it needs to be clean. Needs to show that it's sustainable, that you're not venting, methane for no good reason and things like that. So just try and improve and be cleaner and show some commitment to that. I think it's very important, because if the industry doesn't do that, litigation will do.
Yeah. I know the crowd will getting thirsty. So final question. I hear that you've both launched a podcast.
Yes.
What's next? And tell me about this pod.
Well, Addy, it's your idea, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know how to spell podcast until Addy told me.
No, well, this is over a beer, and I suggested to Colin. I said, look, there was a lot of material that we didn't put in the book. A lot of people that we couldn't, or whatever, because of time constraint or various other things, we couldn't do it. And we said, why don't we just do a podcast?
Because it's easy.
It's easy. Well, the way we do it is fairly amateurish. It's called 50 Years of Modern Oil Trading. But basically the idea is now to expand and put some of this material that we missed in the book, and it will be kind of structured around the book. So,
We're taking names later for guests. I see Honorary Wing Commander Paul Newman sitting there.
oh, this done. It's already done. I've got him in the diary.
Doyen of the derivatives market.
I've got him in the diary.
And, one of the most interesting characters you could possibly come across. I think
I'll race you to him.
we're hopeful. We're hopeful, Paul, that you might come.
But we want a lot more also younger folks.
Well, fabulous. Round of applause. Thank you so much. We'll get to the rest of it. Thank you for listening. To find out more about HC Group, our global offices, and our expertise in search within the commodities sector, please visit www.hcgroup.global.